Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Dobbin, and I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to the latest episode of our Amplify Your Brand series, the ultimate live in building a powerful brand in today's digital age. Along with my friend and fellow branding expert Samoa on the screen there, you'll see we're here to share expertise and help you take your brand to the next level. So whether you're an entrepreneur, small business owner, a marketing professional, or someone who's trying to just tinker around with the idea of a personal brand, this is a live stream that's going to be packed with insights and strategies that will help your brand stand out in a digital landscape. So please take some notes, take what you from today and maybe put it into practice, learn and take it into action, because this live stream will it'll obviously help you build a clear roadmap for building a brand that will resonate with your target audience. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to finding another way to amplify your brand. And today's topic we're going to be touching on is logo design, and it's a performance masterclass that Simo is going to put on today. It's going to have tips for logo design excellence and ways to avoid thousands in costly mistakes. So we're going to learn real-world examples and gain insights to ensure the logo makes a lasting impact. And this is where I hand it back to my we'll hand it to you to kick it off and talk a little bit about why we've chosen this topic today, Sim.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that introduction, Chris. And hello, everybody. Simon here, aka Mr. Logo, aka Branding Buff. So today we're talking about logo design because it is a particular area that I've honed in my skills for over 20 years and across the globe. And I've worked across cultures in designing logos, and the patterns just arise and keep coming up. So today's topic will be divided into performance measuring factors. These are some of the KPIs that I've noticed over the years coming up, and I've divided them into 5 sections that I will be talking about in today's live session. And for the purposes of defining performance, this is the introduction that I wanted to give. So with the top 5 KPIs that I've isolated and will be talking about today, it is important to notice that it will not all of them will apply all the time for every brand. So it is important, crucial even, to define what is most important, and from that adopt the KPIs that will then allow you to measure the performance and improve it with your logo design. Specifically logo design, because a logo is many times the first touch point that an audience has with a brand. So with that, let's kick it in.
Yeah, for sure. And for those that didn't watch last week's episode, it does tie a little bit into what we talked about last week. And we did go into depth about the logo not being the only element of the brand. But because of what we talked about last week, we thought this week, let's go deeper and talk about the logo and its impact within that branding journey. So please check out that last week's episode if you haven't already. So now I just want to also touch on the fact that everything we talk about today comes from our branding framework, the P8 program that we have in place, and the P8 framework that allows you to work from 8 steps that we go through with our clients. And today we're going to be touching on the persona area of that, because this is where the logo sits mainly and is developed based on the other criteria that have been put in place for you to achieve this logo. But look forward to seeing what we talk about today. And I'll kick it off with that. You've got your definition of what a logo is all about.
In ancient Greek, logos is the word that literally translated is assigned to meaning. Very purposeful. So logos being the meaning behind a symbol that is associated with a portion of type. Type itself, the typography component of what we usually call logo, is the full definition of what composes most of today's brand ambassadors, as I call them. Logotypes are brand ambassadors. So when you create a logo and build meaning into it and associate it with a type, with a name, you have the overall definition of what a logo is. And with that, let's go into the 5 elements or the 5 KPIs that I like to measure in assessing performance of a logo design. And we kick it off with simplicity. Simple is not easy, And it takes a lot of hard work to make something simple. Most people will know this is the case for everything in life. And it goes through several stages of iteration. Simple does not mean immediate. It does not mean easy. And we're about to find out how. With simplicity in mind, with a logo design, you want to be sure that you're able to ask it a couple of questions. One of those questions would be, can you identify the logo? Can you please bring up the...
Yeah, sorry.
There we go. Can you identify the brand that the logo represents? Can you remember it? And can you draw it? This is interesting because from brief glimpses, we are able to register in our memory box certain shapes, and those shapes are usually the most simple ones in existence. We're talking about the circles, the squares, the triangles, and we have assigned meanings to those circles. And interestingly, as it is, simplicity is one of the most important factors in creating a logo because that's what you want it to be: memorable, identifiable, and associatable. So there was a test run with 150 people, and they were asked to look at specific logos and asked to redraw those logos from memories. The result is the number of pages we're about to see. We have Target's logo there. We have Starbucks logo. And on the next page, we have Domino's and 7-Eleven. Now, this is interesting because, as you can see, they all vary in their execution. Different people have different assignments or associations built in their memory, but they all have similar traits. And this is the important thing to notice. When something is simple enough, you will remember the key traits that define that simplicity, that logo. So that is the first KPI for performance of a logo. Is it simple? Can you remember it? And can you draw it?
Yeah. So just to recap what you just talked about then, just so so you talked about obviously the misconception is some businesses try to include every aspect of their company in the logo. And in reality, the logo should be simple and memorable. Trying to cram too much information in or too many elements in a small design can make it cluttered and difficult to recognize. So focus on conveying the essence of your brand rather than every single detail. As you touched on, can you remember it and can you draw it? So I think those examples you gave there were pretty clear on how if your logo is memorable enough, you should start to see some of the results you're seeing on the screen there. Let's move into the second one. I'll let you read off the screen first and then get into your explanation.
Yes. So the common misconception with scalability is that, especially for small businesses, they might overlook the need for a scalable logo, when in reality, this logo should be able to perform, aka appear, on various platforms and in different sizes. So it's essential to design a logo that remains clear and recognizable at various scales. A logo that's too intricate can lose its impact when scaled down. So again, let's ask a few questions that are going to be useful to guide the process, in particular, creating scalability and building that scale into our logo design. Can you read it on a mobile? Can you build it on a facade? So in today's day and age, we have all sorts of applications for logos. The age of digital is well and truly in its maturity. And with that come our loyal followers that we carry them around in our pockets every day. Yeah. And we interpret the world via that little device. So everything from social media, from connections to visual stimuli, advertising, all sorts of communication and messaging happens both on that palm-sized medium, but it also kept happening outside of it in our world around us. We walk through the streets, we drive through the roads, and we see all sorts of messaging happening and coming at us. And it's important that for, again, identification and recognition purposes, a logo is able to scale just as well as it does in the facade of a building as it does on the palm of your hand. And if we want to go to the extreme, it needs to perform in as little as a thumbnail size. So let's bring up the images that we have there for an example. We're looking at the very well-known bank ANZ. I like to use this example because I love the way their logo was constructed. I've seen it applied over and over again, and I've had the pleasure of seeing it carved into wood in a park that I was walking through, and ANZ was obviously one of the sponsors of that national park. But as you can see, their logo is a perfect example of what scalability means applied to logo design. The image on the left is a photograph of the ANZ Bank in Docklands, Melbourne, and you can see the logo on the facade, on both sides of the facade, and you can read it from afar. It is not too complicated. It doesn't say money. It doesn't say transactions. It doesn't say international. It represents the essence of the brand. It is simple through a human-like figure, which is associatable to most. And in terms of scalability, this figure is able to open its arms up at different sizes and in different color representations. So when you receive a message in your phone from ANZ or you access their bank app, you will see that little representation logo in against the blue background, where if you have noticed, the colors flip. What is white is blue, and what is blue turns to white. Now, they made it their decision to control the environments in which, or not to control the environments, but control the logo and the environments it's going to appear. That's not by chance. It was a designer that made that possible, and it also scales to horizontal applications just as well as it does with vertical applications. With that, we'll lead into the third KPI for logo type design. Flexibility. So, as I mentioned, horizontal application and vertical application of the logos are two of the three typical applications of a logo. They can also be called signatures. That's how I prefer to call them. And therefore, optimizing a logo into different signatures is crucial to maintain the integrity of the brand's essence. The brand logo type should have these three basic configurations in order to answer all types of usage, on average: primary or horizontal, secondary or vertical, and icon, which is usually a favicon or a thumbnail. My recommendation with this is to approach the logo design with a modular mindset, because this will allow to detach the logo from the name itself. This is important because if you have a logo, for example, that is entirely glued from its start to its end, it could be a simple figure that has a cord or an attachment to the name, or it plugs into a letter of the name. It is basically creating a very fixed structure that is then going to make it very difficult to rotate without interfering with readability. And again, going back to the case of ANZ, you notice that the ANZ acronym and the symbol part of that logo, they detach and become interchangeable and adapt to the spaces they're going to be in. The third signature we're talking about, the icon or the favicon, is the 16 pixel height logo that you see on, for example, the tabs of your web browser or your social media profile pictures. Those are 32 pixels height. So when you have a real estate that displays your logo, can you ask and answer, does it still read? That is a very, very important question to ask. And better yet, to be able to respond, yes, it still holds the readability. Let's look at a couple of cases.
Well, actually, just on that though, we work with a number of clients that they especially some of our newer clients or new business clients, they expect the logo to be in one particular way. So when we give them a logo, and this is the version that we give them, when we start changing it around and we put, like you said earlier with the ANZ, the icon above it, side, whatever it is, they go, oh, so I've got 2 logos, or I've got 3 logos. And in short, the answer is yes. But there's always one hero logo is like the default. If you can use it, that's the one you use. But when your logo needs to be, as you're trying to illustrate here with the ANZ, adaptable, and different mediums or different, I guess, needs will pop up where the logo has to either reverse, be landscape, portrait, whatever the case be. But the essence of the logo is still there. You still, if you saw the 2 versions of that logo, you'd see the elements, you'd see something similar about it, and you would know that that's come from that baby, that born, it's been born together. Like they're not identical twins, but they are twins in some way. So yeah.
Yes.
Just one dial.
That's a very good explanation of what we're talking about here. And that is it's not a misconception. It's just lack of awareness, because the job has been done so well that people don't even notice when they're looking at a vertical signature of a logo or a horizontal. This happens a lot, even with the more practical brands that we interact with on a regular basis. Like, I can remember Vodafone off the top of my head, because I received their phone messages. I log into their app and I pass by their shops, but their photo app and the letterheads, they all have different applications of the logo. Yet we don't notice it because it's just so well designed and structured that you change from a square sign, a lit box, for example, that you'll see from a distance when you're walking in the sidewalk where the Vodafone shop is, and something sticks out their facade. But when you walk into their environment, then you see the logo in horizontal, in big, up on the wall. Or if you look at their phone on the app, again, it just changes the configuration. But when we're talking about modular mindset, it's that decomposition and no loss of readability component to it, because you have one element that is detachable and always very coherently applied. It can't just slide anywhere. It is designed to go in a particular place in a horizontal signature, and it's designed to still perform in a vertical positioning in that vertical configuration.
Yeah, I mean, ANZ are quite lucky to have ANZ as a short name. As you said, Vodafone is a longer one, but they've put time into that icon so that when that icon's seen, you naturally put the word Vodafone into your brain. You see that icon, you know it's them. And this is the same with Apple, any brand like that. Thing is that they've spent a lot of money on that. When it comes to small businesses, obviously they don't have the same budget, but they still need to have the same application of these things, so that when their time comes to show off their logos, they can. And obviously, that awareness is a little bit different on a smaller scale, but you still need to be in that position, because as you highlighted today, you're being forced to, because the digital age is forcing us to have a thumbnail logo, and it's forcing us to, when we can, have a bigger logo. You've got to be versatile with that logo. So anyway, we'll move on to the next item there. I just wanted to go a little bit deeper with the flexibility parts of it, but you've actually got some examples here.
Yes, and you recognize this for sure because it's one of our clients. This client had a number of sub-brands to his main brand. He specializes in accounting for handyman services and tradies. And he has 3 sub-brands, one for tradies, one for nurses, and one for truckies. And you will notice the similarities, not just in the family of the logos, but how the association and distribution of color applies. And then how those logos are still readable in different configurations. We've got a vertical or a stacked version. We've got a horizontal. And then flexibility comes into how that logo displays in environments that are not simply a white background. Because again, when we talk about logo design, anybody can put together a figure that looks mildly okay against the white background. But what happens when the white background turns into red, or it turns into a non-contrasting color, or it turns into the reversed opposite of that color that it was designed for. So this is how a proper logo design process should address all of those exceptions and all those different uses. So you're not just stuck to one logo, and then one day, if it needs to be put in the sponsorship list of a brochure and it needs to be reduced into one color, it becomes unreadable all of a sudden. That's lost money. That's usually lost business and a missed opportunity. So the cases that we've shown you thus far cover all of those applications. The three main applications that we like to call signatures, and they're modular in character.
Yeah. So, talking about originality.
Originality. With logo design, the misconception is, especially for some small businesses, is that they believe a logo can be designed quickly without any thorough research. And this produces a number of what we call Me Too examples. We'll get into that in a minute. The reality, though, is that not only is research crucial for understanding your target audience, it also creates the ability for you to stand out from your competitors, avoid the industry trends, and have a much better solid understanding of these elements so that your logo, if it truly resonates with your audience, but it avoids looking the same as everybody else. So the questions here are, is it a unique or a Me Too logo? Does it apply only to that particular thing, brand, service, or product? This is a very difficult question to answer. But the first question being, is it a Me Too or does it stand out? So we've all driven along a road and we've seen mechanics along the wayside. We've all learned to recognize that mechanics invariably, almost to a pulp, use the same structure of logo time and time again, and sometimes even following certain industrial areas, you will see 3-4 mechanics all having the same variation of the same logo saying the same thing. I'm talking about something that is so much used that it's become a cliche, with the profile of the car being the defining element of the logo. But then again, this is exactly the case where we highlight this is a case of Me Too, and it's not saying anything different. And again, it could be lack of research, it could be lack of awareness, but the fact is that there are many industries in which this happens. In the coaching industry, for example, which is a niche that we like to work with a lot, it is not uncommon at all to use two very cliche type logos. One of them for females would be your watercolor round circle in the background with some calligraphic cursive type over it. And another one is the figure, the human figure with the arms standing up, as into portraying growth and evolution. So while they have the best intentions in mind, the execution and again, lack of research could have prevented this from happening. And it doesn't really say anything different than every other business in that industry. So cautionary tale, do spend some time on research. Logo design is not just scribbling, it's not just drawing, it's not just telling your designer to do what you like. It is a lot of research, so you know where the pitfalls are. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about the pitfalls in just a minute.
Another one that does this really well, in the sense that they just don't look at themselves differentiating very well, is dental industries. The tooth becomes everything, and it's like, so everyone's got a tooth in their logo. This is just another example of an industry standard where things just sort of get a bit out of hand. But we don't want to be different for different sake. I mean, what you're sort of saying here is that we still look at what your brand brings to the table, what history it has, all those things we've talked about in other episodes of this live stream that we do with Amplifying the Brand, because there are things that you bring to your table that no one else does. there's, whether that's even just your own personality yourself, there's something in you that can be put into the DNA of your brand that can bring something to the table that no one else can replicate. There's always something that you can bring to the table.
Correct. And this just implies that research and the process of following a structured questionnaire, having answers, and actually force your brain to give you different answers, because it's easy to fall into stereotypes and say the regular everyday kind of things. We stand for quality, we're professional, this and that, but then we're overlooking the features that define the people that work in that brand, which inherently gives that brand a very specific feel to the outside audience.
That's right. So originality is important. So please, if you're a small business and you believe the logo can be done in 5 minutes, the simple fact is you may get lucky, but in reality, it really
statistics are stacked against you.
It comes unstuck at some point. So you've got an original example here. So
yes, I chose this example because one, it's close to my passions. Basketball has always been something that I've been very much into, and this particular basketball event, despite being for younger generation, children aged 11. It was a tournament that happened in the city of Faro in Portugal. While not being a huge brand, it is sort of an international event, and it kept happening every year. So I thought it was purposeful to hone in on the specificities that made that event unique in itself. So if we have a look at the couple of photos there, what I did was I took a couple of very unique traits about the Portuguese culture, and especially in the south of Portugal, that I thought could be interesting to build that logo and embed it with originality. Because everybody holds all stars. It's not a new concept to basketball. The tournament, international gatherings, is not new in itself. What made it that this logo could only belong to that city was the fact that it used the Portuguese stonework that is paving the main arteries, the main streets of the city. You will notice the figures, that the crests that were used for the 4 quadrants in the ball, the double-lined pattern that illustrates, again, the pavements of that city. They were used to complement with the blue skies that the south of Portugal is so well known for, and create that environment where to lodge the ball and give it that very unique local character. Again, this is just an example, and it didn't have a business character to it, but I thought it was an interesting application of what made that event unlike others from the visual logo design perspective. So this is a way in which you can look at the things that you have around you that you probably have become numb to, but with a little bit of perspective and a little bit of stepping outside your usual patterns, you can identify and pull them into a brand, and specifically the brand ambassador, again, the logo design. With that,
no, but this happens with a lot of brands, especially even government logos and things like that. They usually work on things that are natural to their area, and you will see that a lot of states, when they have their logos developed, will use a plant or a animal or something that is unique to their area, and instantly gives them a backstory and a unique value on what they do in that area. So it might be a plant that only grows in their regions, or it could be an animal that is known in that area, and it gives them some unique element that we can create.
And it's very pertinent you mentioned that, because it speaks to their constituents. It's the population that's the audience, and the population knows what this is about, not just because they know the backstory and they lived in the area enough to identify the inherent features that define the zone, but because somebody put the design process in place and made that become the connection and the identifiable feature that made the logo design so unique.
Yeah, and that can either give the local some instant pride in that logo or some attachment to it, so some emotional side of it, or it can be educational for those that aren't aware. They can go look this up and then find out that relevancy, and then all of a sudden the logo for them has more meaning because it's, you know, wasn't there for them, but then they go find it and now it has an attachment to it, and that can create buy-in to whatever that logo is representing. So
that's right.
It's a really cool way of bringing in that unique element and the emotional attachment, which is something we've talked again in previous episodes, which leads to this kind of thing. So,
so the last KPI that I over the 20 years that I've been designing logos that I've identified is timelessness. So when creating logo designs, trends, effects, personal likes, cool fonts end up detracting from longevity and timelessness. If you can make it work in black and white, if you're strong enough to ignore the flavor of the moment and make it relevant to the audience, regardless of the daily fashion tip in terms of visuals, you will be on your way to creating something that allied with the previous KPIs we've established. You're going to be able to build something for the ages. Let's look at Coca-Cola's logo. That thing has been around since forever. It has stayed away from effects, even though it absolutely recognizes the flavors of the moment, the trends of the moment. It has been able to uphold its integrity for dozens of years. And that's a feat by itself. If we look at some of the fashion brands and their very simplistic logo designs, they work in black and white. They have a character to them. They're usually an acronym or a typeface approach to their name or the initials of the designer, the author, but they have avoided and stayed away from the cool effects, the drop shadows, the 37 fonts, the
vignettes,
40 colors built
over the last couple of years.
Yes, absolutely.
That trend thankfully has gone away.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Instagram's a great example of that, where fortunately their logo was a great black and white logo, but when vignettes came in, they just applied it to their logo and their branding, and you know, we've seen how that's worked out. Now, when you look at it, it's starting to date.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Because it was a trend. So
yeah.
And Coca-Cola, just on that too, by the way, they have very, very recently changed their logo to look like it's wrapping around a bottle.
Yes.
But it's still sticking to the true essence of the, as you said, the typeface that they've got. So they've kept that timeliness with it, but they have decided that the bottle is so iconic and so, you know, relevant, even if it's on a can. When you see the logo, you're seeing the logo usually bent.
Correct. Yes.
They pick up on that. So now that's what they've done. So they've literally said, well, that's how you're seeing it. We're going to put that everywhere. So
and introduce volume through the very simplistic still application of basically two colors, which is the red in the background and the white of the bottle silhouette.
So like
very clever.
Again, some of these brands have spent millions on doing this, so that's why it's very memorable. But even if you're a small business and you're establishing yourself, some of these things still need to be taken into consideration, because the last thing you want to do is launch your new brand, your new logo, and 12 months later you have to ditch it all and start again, because it was just a fun trend that happened that year that everyone went down that pathway and you did it. So
and now has become completely obsolete and in sometimes even hated to an extent.
That's right.
Is the word that I'm looking for.
So you've got some logo design pitfalls. So talk me through this. What is this all about?
So at the start of the presentation, we're talking about thousands of dollars. Let's look at the pitfalls that could represent thousands of dollars saved or spent. So with the first logo design pitfalls, we are inevitably having to talk about rebranding costs. For small businesses, this is an average that I read some time ago. Every 3 to 4 years, a small business thinks a rebranding is required. This is an issue because it just keeps spending more time on revitalizing the brand touch points. That could be print costs, that could be design costs, that could be digital costs, that could be website updates, potential marketing expenses, all of these things that need to be refreshed after 3 to 4 years eat up into whatever profits that brand was able or not to make in the meantime. And now they have to refresh it. And usually the lesson is not learned on the first or two rebrands. Usually it just takes a longer time to realize that the apparently cheap design that was made with lack of research, with no attention to scale, no awareness of what to do for longevity, eventually cycle into the future and bites these small businesses in their behinds. So rebranding costs is definitely one of the pitfalls with logo design that inevitably costs very many thousands of dollars. You wanted to say something, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I will highlight the fact that we did talk about this in a recent episode where we went through the rebranding, revamping, and restyling when it came to logo, not logo, but brand development. And we did touch on, we did go deeper into some of those costs and things that you need to think about when you go down this pathway. So some people think it's a rebrand, and we went deeper into maybe it isn't a rebrand. Maybe there's something else you can do to avoid some of these pitfalls we've just talked about. So what's the next thing on this list?
Well, lack of recognition and trust is a big one. And having spent so much time inside forums on social media, usually the detractors of logo design will throw easy cliches out when the conversation of how do you like my logo comes around. They basically talk about what purpose does a logo serve in sales. It does nothing for sales. I'm not choosing things based on their logo, but the fact is, people build associations, and again, the logo is the condensation associated meaning to a brand or experience. Because at the core of it all, it's what we talked about at the start of the last week's session. Again, restyling, revamping, and redesign. The associated meaning that an experience built in somebody's perception is going to be brought up again when that logo, that symbol, brings up those memories. And if you're not able to create that in a positive light, you're putting yourself or putting your brand a step behind, forcing that business basically to invest more in marketing and promotions to compensate for the lack of brand appeal. And interestingly enough, logos don't sell. They're not meant to sell, but I have myself made a couple of decisions because I'm partial, but then I confirmed it via other people that found me on social media, and they looked at the logo that I had in my business, my other business, and they chose the first contact because they liked the logo, which is interesting to note because, like I mentioned, this recognition, this trust building is made via that first touch point, aka the logo.
Yeah, and we did, again, just to reiterate another episode, we've talked about that where we went into depth of the logo is, as I said, a first touch point, but it's also built on other touch points that have built the recognition of that logo, so that emotional trust and behind that logo has come from those elements. So understanding those things allow you to develop your logo further, and that's where that stuff you're talking about, that lack of recognition and trust, can come. But in saying that, though, an icon can straight away, through symbolism, if you put something, we've talked about this, and there's been many things on social media where a logo, when you look at it, you realize that it maybe looks a little bit too sexy. It probably Maybe you're saying something it shouldn't say. There are all sorts of
Or
things
it
that happen
looks
with logos.
like something that is usually a taboo.
Yeah, taboo or something like that. So you be mindful of hidden messages within your logo. I guess that leads to the third opportunity here, which is
The missed marketing opportunities that all of this will have cost you by then. And I want to maybe just talk about one quick one because it's a recurring one. Getting your feedback from irrelevant audiences is also leading to missed marketing opportunities. Asking or creating logos. This is an interesting one because I'm not going to mention names, but the funniest, the most extreme application of what I'm talking about here ever happened to me. It stuck to my mind. Which is basically I was developing a logo for a political figure, and the logo got knocked back because the political figure's wife didn't like the logo. So pandering to irrelevant audiences with all the respect and love that I have for people's relatives, friends, and family, they're rarely the audience demographic profile that you want to get feedback from. Make sure that you get 10 good pieces of feedback from an ideal customer profile rather than ask your hundreds of friends who are going to tap you on the back on social media. They're going to love you or not. Sometimes it happens that it doesn't, but it just doesn't cut it when it gets to the performance arena. It gets put on the marketplace and it fails to connect. It fails to identify. Even though your friends who loved it and will never buy from you, or on average are least likely to buy from you, they've given you great feedback and you felt the warm, fuzzy feeling. It wasn't designed with the end audience in mind. So with that, the pitfalls.
Just on that though, I want to highlight the fact that if you do this, the problem with doing that is most times when people give it to their family or friends or their wife or whatever the case be, is they just say, "Do you like the look of it?" So
Yes.
they don't give it context, right? So if you give your logo to someone like this, please try to give them some context and say, this logo is trying to talk to a particular audience or it's trying to say something. Then get their feedback, because if the feedback, and then when I say get their feedback, take it with a filter where you're looking for certain keywords and certain responses from them that may be detracting or negative to what you're trying to achieve. And that's something to take notice of. But don't take notice of things like they don't like the color, they don't like the font, they don't like the things like that. Some of those things aren't as relevant. It's more about their emotional feelings to that logo if they can put themselves in the shoes of the target audience.
That's perfect. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Cool. Yes.
Alrighty. So we're going to move on to a no-no.
Yes. We have pitfalls and then we have definitely no-nos. And I've just, as a bonus to today's session, which is already going at 43 minutes.
Yep.
But I love to talk about this, and it's something that is very quickly to summarize. There are three big no-nos with logo design. The first one we've already talked, and this is the negation of adopting that performance KPI has a factor when designing a logo, which is going overboard and trying to include too much, put too many cues, inform in excess, and basically create complexity instead of going for simplicity. Using overboard figures instead of clean lines, using too many colors instead of keeping it to a 1, 2, maybe 3 color schemes. That's one of the biggest no-nos in logo design. Complexity over simplicity. Chris.
Yeah, and I was going to say, when it comes to colors, the colors can come into a color palette that doesn't have to be seen in the logo. The logo itself can have those 2 or 3 key ones that you need. At best, it's black, white, and one other color. But then you add other colors, and our logo is a good example of this, where these particular icons mean something, and that's why these colors have been used in it. But you don't see us splashing out on the logo. It doesn't have like a rainbow effect going on throughout it. It's very subtle. It's there, and the dots can be removed in circumstances when it's not required. As an example of how our logo has used 4 colors, but it has purpose, and there's a whole reason behind why those things exist. If you're needing that, and we also then have a secondary color palette that we have attached to our logo as an example, and you will notice many brands have this going on in their stuff as well. And the best example of this is, and we've talked about this, is Google and Alphabet. They're an example of a company that could literally be just a big splatter of rainbow and a whole bunch of things because of their dependence on the 4 colors that are very similar to ours, that they have found ways to make that magical, as in like they've found a way to make it clean and simple and purposeful. And that's the power of branding and color when you get it right.
They simplified the use of their colors to a system.
Yeah, exactly, and got that right. All right, so as we said, we're moving along. So number 2, what's the no-no?
Yeah, it's becoming a Me Too. So too much Me Tooing. The logo should reflect the essence of the brand, as previously stated, the values it stands for, and what sets it apart from competitors, instead of looking like everybody else in the space. Because there's a degree of advantage in looking like everybody else in the space, but there's a higher degree of disadvantage when you're not the best price, which locks you into that competition to the bottom based on price alone. So your logo is a missed opportunity to say why you're different, instead of saying, oh, I'm doing this too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I believe you have a third one. Yes, they all come in threes. Yep.
Yes, they come in threes, and they're the direct opposite of the recommended best practices for performance, including the scalability and versatility. Lack of testing at different sizes and distances. This is something that I recommend people to do. And again, put your logo or your logo design options inside a phone. Make it fit a social feed. Project it onto a wall, step away, look back at it. Does it read? Can you still identify what it is? Because sometimes a face figure or a human figure will not require the eyes to be looking a certain way unless they're very stylized and very specifically emphasized. You may not need all that over complication. And if you haven't tested it at different sizes, this is your last opportunity to take that advice on board. Make it work with one color, test it, make it work on horizontal, vertical, and you should be good to go.
Yeah, great. All right, so wrap up the coffee cup moment that we get into. Talk it through.
Remember that a well-designed logo should be timeless, memorable, versatile, and representative of your brand's identity. Avoid the common mistakes we've spoken about today, and this will help you create a logo that creates a lasting impression and contributes to your brand success.
Well said. So there we go. So hopefully today, everyone, you have taken on board the 5 tips that we highly recommend you take on board when exploring your logo and getting it developed. As we've touched on in other episodes, your logo is not the only element of your brand, but there are 5 things we've talked about today that are really important when it comes to developing a logo and giving it the best chance of success, and then giving you the opportunity to execute on these other brand elements we've talked about in the past. So thanks again for your time today. I do want to highlight quickly that we have just launched the downloadable of last week's episode of Mastering Your Visual Identity. So we unveiled the 8 elements of an impactful brand, and we went into a deep dive into the key elements that make your visual identity shine. So if you'd like to get a copy of that, please visit our blog and you will see the download there, and you can get a copy of it where you can go through and keep it in your back pocket, the 8 handy elements that make an impactful brand. Do you have anything else you want to touch on today that we can sign off on with the 5 tips?
I always love to ask people where they're watching this, whether it be now live or later on online. Just let us know where you are watching this and what you took away from it. What is your number 1 tip from today's 5?
Yeah. Thank you again. So thanks again for being with us to the end. And we look forward to seeing you next week as we amplify your brand.
Your
Thanks again, guys.
brand.